Well, just a few weeks ago, Julian, Lute, and I spent some quality time together at the Great Place to Work conference in New Orleans, and it's been a little bit since I've been back to a conference, so I was a little out of practice. But it was great. It was really great to be back. It was a really wonderful conference, and I asked Julian Lute, who is the senior manager and strategic advisor at Great Place to Work, to come on to Great Mondays Radio. Lots of greats going on. Great Mondays, Great Place to Work. To talk a little bit about some of the main themes that came out of the conference, and kind of what we observed. So, Julian, thanks for coming on Great Mondays Radio.
Of course, my pleasure. Great to see you. We've been
Good to
friends
see you
for a long
too.
time. It's awesome to be here with you.
Yeah, yeah. So, what a joy to be back, and to hang out with some of the folks there, see some old faces and meet some new folks. Lots of really good content. It was a very impressive, large conference, lots of different tracks. The one that struck me, and the sort of the theme that kind of that I took away, was around this, what I felt was a reemergence of, or kind of a rebirth of, emphasis on employee resource groups,
Mm.
ERGs, or some folks called them ARGs, associate resource groups. And there was a bunch of content at the conference about it. There was even a special track for them. And it there I just thought there was a lot of, they've been around for a long time. I've thought about I wrote about them in my book from 5 years ago, so it's not like they're new, but
Right.
there was a lot of kind of freshness about it, and I thought it would be interesting to kind of resurface it, think about a little bit, or talk a little bit about what you heard, what I heard, and what you've learned, because you've done a bunch of research on ERGs over the past couple of years. And yeah, that's what I'm hoping to cover. So talk to me. What You were part of the crew or sort of part of the planning. What was the impetus behind putting so much emphasis, the impetus behind the emphasis of the putting so much emphasis behind all the content around ERGs?
That's a great question. So, we placed a little bit of an internal bet, I'd say maybe 4 years ago, when we were thinking about, especially as you start to think about the pandemic, and what was happening in 2020. And there was still this need for people to feel included and belonging in the organization. And so, we placed a little bit of an internal bet that said, you know what, we really think that ERGs are a really strong business place, and can make a strong business case for belonging, and they can support the business in a lot of different ways. And when we went out and started talking to some of our largest clients about it, and we kind of led with ERGs. Hey, what do you think about activating your ERGs differently? It was a little bit silent in the room at times, right? People were not quite sure what to do with ERGs, because just what you said, Josh, they've been around for a long time. They've been this thing that have brought people together for, like, either a social space, or even a place for people to think about how they want to help the business. But companies really haven't. Many companies haven't really figured out how to really harness that. So we placed that bet a few years ago and thought, even if people didn't kind of listen to it then, they're going to find that's really, really, really still true to this day, and they'll discover. So we placed that bet. And then about a year and a half ago, with some of the companies we were working with under the Great Transformation, these were like 12 companies, 11, 12 companies that were really trying to, advance equity of representation, of opportunity, well-being, and compensation. All of their projects that they were working on, they may have started here or started there. It all started to converge around ERGs. And so we realized that, oh, if people really wanted a vehicle to really help people belong, ERGs were the thing. Even though they didn't start with ERGs, that's kind of where they ended up. So that's why I think, ERGX at the summit this year took and it's an underserved market. Those folks of
Mm.
people, those people work every single day, many times for free, right, off the side of the desk to help make their companies better, not just for belonging, but also for driving innovation in products and services. And they don't get a lot of support, and they don't actually get to meet folks outside of their own organization. So we said, can we go farther together if we just bring all these people together, let them cross pollinate and get some ideas out there really to maximize the business case. And from what I saw, they were doing all the work. So yeah, that's what that was the nugget was. Let's
Yeah.
place this little bet that we think ERGs are actually the way to go over the next 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, it's almost like going down to the street level, like making an impact right in your neighborhood. And that feels correct to me. And obviously you guys found out it was a pretty good bet. I want to pick up on something that you just said, which is the way that these are run. It is often, and this actually came up with some of my students this year I was teaching, and they had also brought this point up, which is folks are asked to do it out of the goodness of their heart. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
and they're like, you you should would you like to help your community? And the what what the conversation ended up being is like it takes a lot of energy, and then we're getting, it's like individuals are getting pressured to do a lot of work here, and then it's like, well, how am I supposed to do this again, like you said, off the side of your desk? What have you seen trend wise? Like, are people being compensated, and if they're not, like, how is it that people are making this? I guess ultimately the question here is like, how do we make this sustainable?
Yeah.
How does this become something that's a reliable uh effort, right? Like something that's
Yeah.
going to make it, because it's you can't just start it and then, like, 9, 12 months later you're just like, oh yeah, that thing.
Yeah. Well, there's no other part of the business where you people volunteer to do this work,
Right?
right? Like, are there
Right?
financial, like, is it finance? Hey, would you volunteer to, be a senior accountant in our business? No, like, there's a clear business case, there's clear outcomes that we're searching for. So this is like that's why it's so weird, because it's one of the only places in the business where you get this sort of like you're just trying to get into people's good faith and spirit to like run this thing that actually is very, very critical to the business. Like you talked about the companies, right? The impact. One of the stats that we found in our research was that people who participated in ERGs, right, that they were 40% more likely to feel good about the way that their companies impact their communities. Like
4040.
or 040, like 40% more
That's amazing.
likely.
Plus 40. That's
Plus
crazy.
40. And you're like, so this is something that, and how much money do companies spend on a year to year basis to make sure that their communities feel like they're in touch with them and that they're supporting? So
Yeah.
you wouldn't ever do this with any other part of the business. But there's two things. I'd say if, I wish that there was like in Vegas, there was like an odds maker for company culture, because there's not. But there is right now, there's this big divide between like, do you compensate ERG leaders for this work? Or do you let them do it, like you said, out of the goodness of their heart? Some companies are moving towards compensation because they know it means something. They know
Mm.
that it's material time and effort that people are putting in. And it's another way for people to feel like they're valued through compensation, right? But what we found in our research was that sure, you can compensate people, but what people really want, and in any company, is growth, development, opportunities for them to share and showcase what they're good at and contribute to the whole of the business. So let's just say you had a company and you were compensating people, giving them money for them to be a leader of an ERG, but you
Mhm.
weren't giving them pathways for growth. You weren't giving them access to senior managers or visibility. You weren't giving them additional, that responsibility was not recognized in sort of their work. The money couldn't compensate for that. You know what I mean? But the people who may not have had the financial compensation, but had more career development opportunities, had more visibility with leadership, got to work with executive sponsors that were higher up in the business and actually felt like they were contributing. I mean, their scores went through the roof in terms of how they felt that their workplace was a great workplace. So, you could find yourself on either side of that conversation. But if you're not kind of coupling whatever the compensation piece is, it doesn't have to do with ERGs. Even before ERGs, just a regular person working like
Yeah.
myself. If I don't feel like I have access to growth opportunities and all those other
Yeah.
things,
Yeah.
The money is cool, but I'm going to spend that. We're all going to spend that. We need the other things that keep us feeling like we're growing and that we're contributing to the broader purpose of the business.
Okay, so sure. So that makes sense. That's some data that certainly I think has been out there around, what people want. How do they want to be what value do they want to receive from the business for their contribution, right?
Absolutely.
So we're moving further and further away from um paid hours at your keyboard, right? And obviously there's a lot of other ways that we contribute or that employees contribute, and then there's a lot of ways that capital that organizations will value those and provide, right? And salary is just one of those. So that's the case that you're making. So if it's something that the organization should be doing anyways, what are some ways that you've seen the companies that you work with recognize, provide that growth extra to the ERG leaders?
hmm So I think I'm going to focus on talent for a while because I think that is the thing that most people are trying to figure out. Like, how do I grow in the business? How do I either move up the
Yeah.
chain or
Yeah.
how do I, increase my span of control? So if a company can see their ERGs as a talent center, right? You've got people who are volunteering off the side of their desk to run these organizations that have budgets and have responsibility for people. They're developing programs. They're interfacing with senior leadership. They're doing many of the things. They're being leaders themselves. They're doing many of the things that you might put someone through a program to learn how to do. If you could see those ERGs as truly talent centers, you actually figure out that you can, shorten your time for succession planning, have that next generation of leaders sort of right there, and you're kind of marrying that purpose with productivity. Now, I don't know any ERGs, especially with the companies that I get to work with, that are going to put mediocre leaders in those positions, right? Like these leaders that are in charge of ERGs or surfacing or coordinating ERGs across the business, these are great business leaders. They're not just people who feel good about their community. So they're not putting in just anybody in there. So if you can see those as a place where you can elevate this next generation of leaders, I think you really, really get it. So you got to put that into your talent management system. So
Yeah.
tracking ERG leadership, have you been? What have you done in terms of the outcomes? Like literally formalizing that. Sometimes you can actually, I've seen one organization actually use their ERGs to help identify the next generation of talent.
Well,
So
that's
not
it.
even just them. It's like, well, who else do you all see because of who you're working with who might be the pull up? So
Uh-huh.
bringing them into that conversation. What were you going to say? I want to hear what
Yeah,
you were
no, that's
saying.
exactly where I was headed, which is like it's a self-selecting group. It's ERGs are typically volunteer based. And
Right.
so those people are selecting themselves. They're the ones that are going to care about that. There's the ones that are going to show up. And so the next step for me, right, being a communications guy is how do you articulate that? So once you've got that going and it's been 3 years and you see like the employees understand that the ERGs are a play, you're like, ooh, that's where people get going. But it's like, or they pick those people there and they want to be motivated. But if you're going to get started, and that's kind of where we are in this is most organizations, even if they have ERGs, they're not, robust talent engines
That's
there.
right.
So we need to say, hey, this how are we, and I don't know, if there's a communications management strategy around this, but it's like,
Mhm.
hey, join the ERG and you're gonna get training. You're gonna be, it's like you're gonna get these benefits. Like that to me is where this conversation, like the next logical step is by joining you. Not only it's not just about your community, but you're investing in your community and your team and yourself.
That's right. Yes, absolutely. And I think, especially if let's say you're early in the journey. I mean, I've worked with companies that have had ERGs for a long period of time, but in terms of the maturation model, like they're
That's right.
still towards
Yeah.
the beginning of it. And then I've seen some that have just sort of sprouted up over the last 2 years that are way faster, have accelerated way more quickly towards where they want to go. And there's two things that I've seen. One is starting out with the focus on governance, right? Like, how will ERG leaders be picked? It's the stuff that no one really wants to talk
That's
about
right.
beyond just, so like, how will they be picked? How long will you be there? What are the things that are the out, like, not just let's have a picnic because we all are of this same demographic and we want to have a place together to like talk about our experience. It's like, no, what's the trajectory for this for the next 3 years, just like you called out. So starting with that governance, I've seen that really be the thing. And then what I've seen later on is you get people who have done it and you see them move throughout the organization, and you get the chance to say, you know what? I was working with Sally. Sally was a, executive sponsor or a executive or a leader of an ERG. And look at where she's gone. Look at what that's
Right.
taken. So you got to find the time and give yourself enough time to like create the stories, because there's no checklist that you're going to be able to sell someone on it unless they can actually see that happening. Believe it or not, in certain communities and amongst certain organizations, being a part of an ERG is almost a career inhibitor, depending on how far you go up the ladder. It's like, I don't necessarily want to be associated with said group because they are oftentimes making demands on the organizations, holding accountabilities in ways that once you start moving up, you're like, we don't want that rocking of the boat.
Yeah.
But in the best organizations, they really ask for those executive leaders to participate in the ERGs in some way, whether it's through being a sponsor or some sort of advocate, and have a special part of the place at the table for those conversations. Now, so that's what I've seen. I think you got to start with the governance, and I think you got to figure out a way to help people see that you can actually move in the business by being an ERG leader. And it's okay to be a technical expert, and it's okay to be in an ERG, and you can actually have a great span of control, and you can actually help our company, impact what it is that we're trying to do every single day.
So beyond, let's then push that forward. The beyond the talent centers, which I think is incredibly valuable in and of itself. How do we? What are the benefits? What are the data points that we need to look for, that prove the investment and almost minimal investment in an ERG? Needs to be more, but it's the kind of my hypothesis is what you're giving and what you're getting is, there's a huge benefit to that. I think that's what you're arguing as well. So
Mhm.
what are some of the other benefits that we can expect, that business leaders can expect from a robust, well supported ERG set of ERGs?
Yeah, so I'll say two main like broad topics. One is like we're talking a lot about psychological safety, emotional safe workplaces, right? Healthy workplaces. People who are compared to non-members of ERGs, ERG members report 25% more likely to report a 25% more psychologically and emotionally healthy workplace. So you get some wellness benefits, which I think people like. I think they like the ENPS, right? The net promoter score. It's about 25% for folks that are a
Yeah.
part of ERG. So you get that kind of like flywheel of benefit there. But I think the main thing, when you take it to that next level, it's honestly around innovation. We have this thing called the innovation velocity ratio, and what that means is basically like the number of people who feel like they have meaningful opportunities to contribute to the organization doing things different versus the number who don't. Okay. So there
Mm.
are some people who really feel like I have meaningful opportunities to innovate, while those who don't. In a normal organization, like it's usually about 4 to 3. It's kind of just barely over the four people having that ability to innovate versus 3 kind of creating friction. When you think about this innovation velocity ratio for non-members of ERGs, it's 6 to 2. So 6 having a positive, meaningful, 2 kind of having a friction. When you talk about ERG members, it's 10 to 2. So it's almost double the number of people who feel like they have a meaningful way to contribute to the overall success of the business. So as an innovation guy, I'm always thinking about how do you run your products and services through your ERGs or with the contributions of your ERG. So for example, I was a co-founder of the Black ERG at Great Place to Work, right? And when we started, we were basically like, we're not here for a social club. We're not here to just talk about all the issues. We could talk about all the issues Black people have wherever we are. But how do we meaningfully contribute to the business? So we had to really get deep into our executive team's ear about where's the business heading over the next 3 years? Where do you really need our support? And so they gave us a few, trailheads for us to focus on. And then what we saw was as different teams were starting to roll out either communications, messaging, because we have people from in our ERG that are customer relationship managers. You
They're
got people
across
who
the
are
business.
they're across the business. So
Yeah.
being able to harness that perspective of across the business, cross-functional, was super helpful for us. So we don't look at an issue just as like the Black ERG. You've got people who have specialized expertise across the business from finance all the way to frontline customer service that when they see an issue, they're like, oh, how can we restructure this workflow? And we'll bring that into our ERG. Now, will the company sometimes take it on? Sometimes they will, but they know that we are not just trying to solve Juneteenth problems, right? And
Right, right,
Black
right.
History Month issues, but
Hey,
we're
everybody,
also
we
trying
need
to
me.
figure
Yeah.
yeah, but
Right.
we're also trying to figure out how do we continue to make our business profitable and how to make sure that we're continue to be the global leader in this culture space. So that's how I think you really get people motivated and excited beyond their own personal is helping them realize that because they're here and because they're in these groups, you can actually help our products and services. We can serve our customers better because of your eye.
So then I'm going to go back to to kind of hook into communications. There's a reverse communications where if if you're ERG, you've got an ERG, but it's not got the attention from leadership and executives. Dig in and say, hey, here's some opportunities, and you can communicate to them, and they go, whoa, wait a minute. I thought this was just a social club, right? And you're like,
That's
no,
right.
no, we have these opportunities here, and we need to do that. I think that's really compelling. That's really amazing. How much time does it take to be in an ERG? Like what kind of commitment are we talking about for a typical employee? And again, I'm asking this in the spirit of everybody just feels overwhelmed. I
Yeah.
got so many things, and it's like, those optional meetings, and I'm all for skipping optional meetings, like, and even some required ones as well, because we're overscheduled. Those can tend to be right. You're going to get that fall off. That first meeting is going to be well attended, and the second one may be, but then the third, fourth, and fifth, you're starting to see that drop off.
Yep.
How much? What does it take? Like, how much time are you seeing? What should they expect to commit? And
Mhm.
are there any ways, like, I guess, what are some other ways that we're able to respect people's times, but all time and capacity, but also help them be part of this continue to be. I mean, here I'm just going right back to that, like, sustainable efforts.
Yeah. So as an ERG leader, you see that drop off, and you see that just ebb and flow, right? Depending on the time of the season and the business unit and
Yeah,
people.
yeah,
So
yeah.
you're gonna get that. But the two things I think that matter the most is almost like that what's in it for me for our members, right? So for our folks, is like how do we help them see and program in a way that directly helps them. So, one example, when it's time for performance management, like the 3 months leading up to you starting your performance management conversations, we have a whole series focused on performance management. Now, we do that throughout the year, but we have time, space, bring in speakers to help people figure out how do you tell your story when it's time to sit down with your leader to either get your promotion or keep your job or whatever it looks like for you. So
Mm-hmm.
you make it super relevant for them. That's just one that I know is always important for people. So we always do that. So that's a big one. The other thing that we do is we have specialized time with our executive sponsors every other week so that we can number one stay in tune with what the business is going through, but the other part is that they can see us and our workflow and like what we're working on because they're meeting on their at their cadence. So having them in this at the having a seat at the table and being able to recognize the work of ERGs versus so in a meeting when we're having a big staff meeting, just having your leadership saying these ideas came from the of this ERG, or because we thought about how we talked about sexual orientation over the last number of years. Our LGBT QIA plus ERG really helped us craft this, which has been serving customers, and we've got this sort of response, like people seeing the outcome of their work as related
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
their work with the ERG showing up in the world, and that executives or other leaders, respected leaders, are talking about it. So it goes back to your communication plan. You do need a communication plan within your ERG to be able to communicate this back out,
Yeah.
all the goodness that's happening, and have someone at that table that can rah, rah, rah for you. You should also have, I think, if I'm sitting in an executive seat, there should be a meeting at least quarterly at the least, where you as an executive leader, especially if you're a sponsor of an ERG, that you're bringing forth to the executive team the best ideas that are coming from your ERGs. Like, and they should know that it's coming from your ERGs. You shouldn't be an executive sponsor and no one knows. You should be the advocate at the table, and there should be a time that says, look, what have you been learning from those ERGs? Just like you would say, what have you been learning from the customers? What have you been learning from our partners? What have you been learning from the market? There should be a time for that. And they should be charged with those best and brightest ideas. They should be listening for that all day, not just sitting there, silently in a meeting.
Brass tacks, how often are you
Oh yeah.
meeting? It's all
Yeah.
distributed.
Yep.
It's, what do you, how long are in your
Yeah.
experience, like what does this look like? And what's too long, what's too short, right? Like just
Yeah.
kind of best practices, or at least best ballparks, you know?
Yeah, yeah. So we just got our family, not my part, but my sister-in-law just got a new puppy, right? So I think about it in the same way as having a new puppy, right? Like early on, you have to do things very consistently, right? So you're always waking up and training the pup. So I say that with the ERG too. Like you get up, you have your meetings probably once a month. Leaders like us, we would probably, if we were leaders of the ERG, we probably meet at least once per week for, I'd say, for at least the first year. It's a lot of commitment on the front side because you're trying to gain traction, you're trying to understand the landscape, and you're trying to get momentum. So that helps to create that momentum. What we learned after about a year, 18 months, was that the business cycle is changing. Our company's growing, lots of things are happening. So we moved it to every 2 months. So we'll meet 6 times a year, and then we'll have committees kind of, pardon me, get together in the meantime. But as a leadership team, we still meet weekly, and then we meet bi-weekly with our executive sponsors for about an hour. So they're really dedicating a lot of time to us. And because they've done that, we've been able to come out with best practices to help support the rest of the ERGs that came online. So the investment in sort of that, whatever your, the starting ERGs or those early ERGs, it may feel like you're putting a lot of time into that, which you are, but they actually help form the blueprint so that the other ERGs come online much, much more quickly. I'd say ERG members should expect, every month, they shouldn't have to put more than 5 hours in a month. I mean, at the most, generally, most of the time we'll meet every other month. You might get 90-minute meetings. If that's what we've been doing. We're doing 90-minute meetings every other month versus 60-minute meetings every month. And we try to keep it we think about what they want. And so we had one about self-advocacy because so many people were younger in their careers, and they were, just coming into the workforce, or maybe had a couple of experiences where they didn't have the best self-advocacy, and they reported on that. We said, let's get somebody in here to talk about how do you advocate for yourself. And we kind of pulled on that thread. So we think about, what do you do that's relevant for the population that you have, and ask them lots of questions. Hey, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? We can take it back. The other cool thing that we do are these, and I'm sure you've been a part of these, which are those just like open Zoom sessions.
Hmm.
So we'll open up a Zoom window for 90 minutes, and you can work on whatever you want to work on, but you'll be on mute. They'll be in a community, and then every 30 minutes someone might say, hey, how you doing? You making progress towards your goals? Did you shift? Okay, we got 30 more minutes, and then you keep going. And that has helped build this sense of community, but it also helps to bring people feeling a little bit closer, even when we are all distributed. So that's something
Yeah.
that I think has been very, very, very helpful for us.
Yeah, I mean, it's to me, it sounds like a well-programmed professional community, right?
Yeah.
Like, back in the day, I used to be part of the AIGA, the Professional Designers Association, and there was a
Yep.
local and then a national chapter. And,
Yeah.
it was like, oh, this event's interesting, or this is, oh, I want to learn about this, or, I want to show up to the board meeting and advocate for this. So it's what what it sounds like to me is, and I guess it's not a surprise, but I'm just sort of putting it together, of like, it needs to be professionally managed. I mean, you're really this in order for it to have an impact that is more than just, hey, let's get together as a social club, which I guess is also fine, but it's just not
Mhm.
going to have as much, it's like minimal input, minimal output.
Yes.
But there's a real possibility and opportunity that you talked about your bet, and you're starting to grow in that direction.
Absolutely. There's one thing that we learned over the last like 2 years, I'd say. There's an author named Damon Centola, Centola. He's a sociology professor at the University of Penn, and he talks about organizational change. And one of the big ahas that we had, especially as we were working through what does it mean for an organization to actually change in the ways that we know are best for them to do so. And he was talking about how, you know, in typical organizations, having a leader at the top just like tell you what to do, that's good for sort of like tactical change or
Hmm.
the type of change where you need to like change a process. Processes have to change. Like you can get a top-down change. Where you have to just have a narrow bridge of relationships to kind of get that done. The process is changing, everybody just gets along with it. Now, when you're trying to change an organization and their behaviors, you need influence. You need people who have a close alignment with the business. There's a different type of change, and he calls that wide bridges of change. So he said that when you want, basically behavioral change, like you want the people to act different in alignment with values, in alignment with whether it's DEIB or if it's things like we want to serve our market differently, you have to tap into what are sometimes people on the peripheral of an organization, not necessarily what the leaders are doing, because there will be people who are already enacting this change of how you want the organization to live that's not in the center. So those relationships change if you think about what you're trying to do. So, for behavioral change, for cultural shifts and change, it's not oftentimes that you look towards the center of the organization where you might go for tactical and process information. You might have to look out to the edges of your organization where ERGs sometimes sit, right? Where there are different groups of employees who are having a really great experience of the workplace where they're sitting. And those are some of your biggest influencers. Some of those people have the best alignment with the business, and they're hubs of innovation and doing things differently. And you need to empower those people to pull along this organizational change. That was counterintuitive for me. And I know as we talk to other leaders, for them, they were like, oh, yeah, because we're doing things way different out here. Nobody's even bothering us.
Yeah.
We're just chugging along and we're having a
Yeah.
great time doing it. And if you took some of the lessons that we had, we could move this organizational change and accelerate that faster based on those wide bridges of relationships that people have. ERGs are some of those places where that actually happens.
That aligns with my experience as well. When we do our any sort of transformation, cultural transformation work, we're always looking to pull together what we're calling culture advocates, and
Mhm.
the people that are leaders just in their being, not necessarily leader in their title,
Yeah.
and that those folks have an incredible fidelity, have the incredible like fidelity connection with what's actually happening in the business and what actually can make a difference. And because they're part of that process, then they become the advocates for that work. And then because they have that those charismatic relationships,
Hmm.
other people will follow along. So I
Absolutely.
like that you're putting some language to just an idea that I believe in. So that's great. What share do you have a few resources that you can provide? We can put them in the show notes if you want to just tell us a few things, and then I'll make sure to include it in the episode.
Of course. Well, number one, I do think that our latest report on untapped energy around ERGs is going to be a great resource. It's based on a lot of research, and you'll see all the numbers on there. But it's pretty in depth, and I think when you read it, it will probably um, just verify some of the things that you already know to be true. But I think it has a few actionable things that if you're thinking about where your ERGs need to go next, you
Yeah.
can pull some things from that. So that's, I think, going to be a resource that you can use. I definitely think I have a talk that Damon Santola gave around this wide bridges and narrow bridges. I think that's going to be really excellent. And then we have some takeaways from the summit because, this summit was all about that journey, right? That journey from good to great. How do you go from here to there? And I think that I can link you to a couple of resources that might be helpful for folks that may not have been able to attend, but still want to understand how is AI going to impact our work going forward, right? What is the power of empathy and believing in the human spirit? What is that going to do? Plus, I think about companies like Marriott and Hilton, although they go head to head, oftentimes coming out of the pandemic with nothing, like basically darn near
Zero.
zero revenue.
Yeah.
And by focusing on those frontline people, like the people that really touch your customer, how that helped bring them back out. Plus the business, environment started to rebound. But
Yeah.
they've been able to accelerate because of their focus on the front line. And so I think that that's an important time right now because it's just, we can't forget about the folks that are actually out there with our customers and our clients on a day-to-day basis. They often get lost in the shuffle. We just see the Amazon package show up. You forget about that worker that actually has to scan and
Right.
bring it all to
Right.
your
Right.
door. So those are a few of the things that I'll definitely share. You could put in the show notes. Where the future of work is already here. You know it. You're right there on the front line
Yeah.
with it. And it's about how we're going to do this and bring people along in an environment where you think it's going to be fearful. People don't know how to use AI. They don't know what it's going to do with their jobs. People aren't sure what their careers and what the world's going to look like for them in the next 12 months. So as much as we can help people at least kind of keep the main thing,
Yeah.
we can help people kind of move through this.
That's great. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Julian Lute, Senior Manager, Strategic Advisor at Great Place to Work. A really, powerful brand, something that an organization that I appreciate their work and their leadership in this. And if you have a chance to attend a conference of theirs in the future, recommend it. Thank you, Julian. Really good to talk to you. I appreciate the helping me remember what happened in the very quick 2.5 days that we spent together.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me, Josh. Good to talk to you.